He's completely out of control.
Excuse my face. I've been up in the loft to get these books down, and it's affected my eyes and my nose. So, literally, my wife just said, "Oh, you look tired." I might look terrible, but I want to do this now while I've got the books here and while it's in my head. And it's interesting, though, because I wasn't planning to do a video on this author for a while, because even though he's first division for me, and I'll explain why in a minute, I was going to reread some more stuff. I've been rereading his stuff a little bit over the last couple of years, but I was going to reread some more stuff to do something a little bit more focused on a few books. But then this won't be the last video I do on him. And basically I wanted to talk about someone that I've been obsessively collecting all of my life. So I've actually got over 30 books by him, and some of them are repeats because I've sort of panicked and thought if one of them got damaged or something like that, then I wouldn't have that copy. So if I've seen it, I've bought it. So I'm talking about Robert Sheckley. So Robert Sheckley is a science fiction writer, born in New York in 1926, and he started writing short stories for the magazines, like a lot of them did. And his first short story was put out in 1952, and his first collection was actually Untouched by Human Hands in 1954. It's a really good collection. So I really like this edition of it with that awesome cover. There is a reference to one of the stories, actually. But there was a recent batch of Penguin science fiction classics that came out with like a maroon spine and a white cover. And this was actually one of them, which I was really pleased to see, because I do think he doesn't get praised enough. So Untouched by Human Hands is a really good short story collection that's worth looking at. And this was the first thing that came out. So he has done loads of short story collections, but this is quite a famous book that he wrote. You can see it's not a particularly good condition version of it, although I don't think I had it like that. I think it's got like that over time. Anyway, Immortality Inc. Made into a film called Free Jack, which I'm pretty sure Mick Jagger's in, but it's not a very faithful film. This came out in 1959, and it's a really good book. So if you get a chance to read Immortality Inc., then definitely worth doing. This is about a man who dies, but then gets reincarnated in the 21st century, when reincarnation is just like a daily thing, and everybody lives forever, nobody dies, and the kind of consequences in the world that he now lives in is kind of like quite crazy. So yeah, it's really, really good book. So Immortality Inc. is really good. And I just want to talk about my favourite book of his, and a book that I kept saying for years was my favourite book. I don't think I could say it now, but I've got a lot of affection for this book, and I've read it many, many times. And I've actually got 3 copies of it because I was scared of losing it. So Mind Swap, that's my favourite cover of Mind Swap. But there's that one as well, and there's that one. And I think I've got a 4th one, but anyway, Mind Swap. I'm going to read the back because it's, you know, sometimes it's good to read the back to get a less rambly plot. So it's about Marvin Flynn. Marvin's holiday mix-up sends him body hopping across the galaxy. Mind Swap is the cheapest way to travel, but when a Martian criminal runs off with Marvin Flynn's body, he's forced to take a short shuffle contract collecting Ganza eggs on Melda 2 because of the body he's got. He has to do that. Meanwhile, Detective Undorf tries to track down the absconding Zagragash and break his disastrous run of 158 unsolved cases. Can Marvin survive that long, or will his Terran mind succumb to metaphoric deformation? Because you can't stay in someone else's body for too long. That's the kind of part of the plot. So he's got to keep changing bodies while he's trying to find his own body. So it's very funny, and it's really good, and a very important book to me personally. Then there's Dimension of Miracles, which was also called Journey of Jones. So there's like lots of different versions of this. And this is the book that often people say that they find it hard to believe that Douglas Adams hadn't read any Robert Sheckley, because this is like so Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. what does this one say? A mind-zapping odyssey through the universe. That's the little tagline. And I'll just read the back of this, actually. When Thomas Carmody wins the jackpot in the intergalactic sweep... When Thomas Carmody wins the jackpot in the intergalactic sweepstakes, he's whisked off to galactic headquarters to claim his prize in person. But when he arrives in outer space, the only problem is just how does he get back to Earth? The Odyssey home takes him through the most extraordinary experiences on extraordinary worlds populated by extraordinary people. And overall looms the terror of his personal predator, a monster of many guises, designed and created specially for devouring Carmodies. It's completely mad and quite episodic. So sometimes he gets criticised for writing in an episodic way. So it's like scenes could be arbitrarily put in random places. But, you know, it's part of his charm as well, I think, because these are quite imaginative and wild rides in some ways, and they're funny. So Dimension of Miracles, also Journey of Jones. And then you've got Damocles, which... the one thing I remember, I need to reread this, but the one thing I remember about Damocles is there's a wonderful fourth wall moment in the book where there's a slave girl that decides that her role in the book is too small. So she just sort of changes the scene and makes her role bigger, and all the other characters are freaked out by it. So I like that. So I remember that when I read it, and I read that many years ago. So Damocles, an intergalactic space opera. And then there's a bunch of I've got a bunch of short story collections here. I mean, overall, there's 31 books here. I'm talking about. I've got a lot of his books. There's The People Trap, which is really good. Pilgrimage to Earth. I love that copy of it as well. That was great seeing this little corgi book. Shards of Space. The Robot Who Looked Like Me, that's one of my favourite ones. And this is my favourite short story collection. The Same to You Doubled. I love this short story collection. It's got Same to You Doubled. It's got Cardinal to Onion to Carrot. Dr. Zombie and His Little Fairy Friends. Can You Feel Anything When I Do This is really good. And Starting From Scratch is a really short story. Really short. It's about 4 pages. And I love it. Starting From Scratch. It's like... a Horton Hears a Who kind of story, but it was before Dr. Seuss wrote it. So Same to You Double is really cool, and then Citizen in Space is another one, another really good find there with this old vintage copy. So there's those short story collections as well, and then there's a really cool book that I had, and it got quite knackered. I think this was bought not as bad as this, but I think over time I've had this for about just almost 40 years, and I think this got a bit knackered, but I've got a newer version of this now, so that's not too bad. So I was really pleased to see this in a bookshop in Cosham. So yeah, the Alchemical Marriage of Alistair Compton, and that is when he realizes at the beginning of the book he's very unhappy, and this is a world where schizophrenia is dealt with by putting the personalities in different bodies. And he realizes he's very unhappy, so he needs to find the other personalities that should be in his body, and he wants to rejoin them. But when he meets them, they don't want to rejoin. So it's like he's trying to persuade his personalities to rejoin his body. So as to Crompton, I really like this book, and I'll probably reread it at some point. I'll tell you what, I'll pause for a second just to say that I also have somewhere, I don't know where it's gone, but I've got a Star Trek book that Robert Sheckley wrote as well, based on the DS9 cast. This one here, I've got that. And I know it's around somewhere because I was going to read it for Book Trek this year. But I don't seem to be able to find it for this video. But I've got that as well. And The Status Civilization is really good as well. These are often kind of high concept books. The life expectancy of a new arrival on Omega averaged 3 Earth years. Will Barrett has been accused of murder, and he's been tried and convicted. His punishment was memory washing and exile on a planet called Omega. There the prisoners lived in a society created and ruled by themselves. It was a life of horror, savage and ruthless, where you could only rise to the top on the bodies of those you'd killed, and always your own life was in danger. Will Barrett nearly died the day he arrived, but an elusive and beautiful woman gave him advice and a gun, and he made his first kill. After that, it was a case of keeping one jump ahead. So yeah, quite an original concept, and you know, I think the thing is when you've got sort of encyclopedias like this one, which is a very famous science fiction encyclopedia, and another one that I've got, which kind of criticises him for not taking science fiction too seriously, but he doesn't take himself too seriously. That's the thing, and I think it's part of the reason why I like him, because he has these great concepts, but he doesn't bury them in like a 1,000-page book with tons of exposition and no wit at all. There's a lot of them are funny, and you know, they're kind of extended short stories, you know. So I quite like that. And also the pace and the unpredictability is really good as well. So there's another one I've got doubles of, and to be fair, both copies aren't too bad. That's definitely the worst copy. This is a much better copy. Options was one of the recent rereads, and I really enjoyed it. It's very unpredictable again, very silly. It's similar to Dimension of Miracles in the sense that it's quite episodic and things keep happening to change the character situation. I'll just read the back of this one as well. Whoops. Tom Mishkin is forced to trek across Harmonia to obtain spare parts for his grounded spaceship. To protect him from the bizarre and sometimes dangerous collection of creatures on this alien planet, there is a special purpose environmental response robot. Unfortunately, beneath a cynical exterior, his robot buddy is definitely bewildered and sometimes less than competent. Together they chart a zigzag course from the improbable to the phantasmagoric and beyond. It's a very good book. Journey Beyond Tomorrow is another short story collection, actually. I've got 2 copies of that as well, and they're very similar, but that was a bit more knackered. But again, great stories in this one as well, Journey Beyond Tomorrow. And I'll talk about this thing in a second, but I've also got a Roger Lasney and Robert Sheckley collaboration called Bring Me the Head of Prince Charming, and I think that's similar to when I talked about Snow White and the Seven Samurai by Tom Holt, when he combined loads of different fairy tales and made a kind of a messy, silly, crazy comedy. I think that's what this is, but I haven't read it yet. But it combines lots of different fairy tales into a comedy farce, if you like. So unusually comedic for Roger Lasney, so that's a bit odd. But maybe they got drunk one day and came up with the concept. I don't know. And then there's these. So these are interesting because one of the things about Robert Sheckley that I find quite interesting is that, as far as I know, he was the first one to come up with the idea of a kill competition. There is a term for it, but Stephen King did that in Running Man. You've got Battle Royale, the Japanese story, and you've got the Hunger Games. But before that, you had the Hunter Victim, Victim Prime, and 10th Victim books that all span off a short story that appeared in this book, Untouched by Human Hands. So literally his first book, it ends with a story called 7th Victim. And 7th Victim sets up this world, which I will now explain to you. In order to release the aggressions which normally culminate in wars, governments have agreed to license the hunting of each other by individual men and women with prizes for the highest scorers. When Caroline Meredith notches up her 9th kill, she seems well on her way to becoming the first female tens winner. Her next victim is in Rome. Who his hunter is, he may only discover when it's too late, or never. All he knows for certain is that he is the 10th victim. And at every meeting, every passing stranger, every action, every corner may hold the possibility of sudden death. So I reread the 10th Victim recently, and it was a little bit odd that there was some sort of racial language at the beginning that I know wasn't inappropriate at the time it was written, but just sounds a bit weird now, which was a little bit jarring, but I did enjoy it once I'd ignored that and cracked on with the reading of it. But I do need to reread these again. But it's just interesting that he came up with that idea back in the 50s, and people have done their own take on it, but nobody seems to talk about the fact that Robert Sheckley had this idea of these broadcasted murders, you know, where they're sort of the hunt is seen as a game to be rewarded with. So it's interesting. So there's that, and then there's a book that he edited of short stories. So there's people featured in this short story collection like Roger Selazny and Harry Harrison and Philip Jose Farmer, Thomas Dish, Bob Shaw. So lots of people featured in there, Ian Watson, and that's called After the Fall. So if you get a chance to see that, that's edited by Robert Sheckley. And there's a couple of really good collections of his best works. There's this Robert Sheckley Omnibus, which I think features Immortality Inc. Yeah, Immortality Inc. is in this collection, if you get a chance to see that. And then this is The Store of the World. So this is a more recent collection of his short stories. And let's see what's in it. Has it got a... Yeah, there's loads of stuff I've just talked about, actually. Loads of great stuff that's on these. Yeah, just having a quick scan of the stories. There's some really good ones there. So, Story of the World is a good one to get, and it's relatively newly put out as well. So there's that. And last but not least, the reason why I'm doing this video is I've just finished a book that I didn't know about. I found it in a bookshop. It's very rare, as you can probably imagine, going through what I've just gone through. It's very rare for me to find a Robert Sheckley book I haven't got. And I saw this on the shelf. I couldn't believe it. I was like, what the hell is this? And it's like a spy parody. So there's the man's name there, The Game of X, and it's supposed to be like a James Bond parody. And I've just finished reading it, and I really enjoyed it. It's very good. It's very funny. It's not as big a parody as you'd expect. It's very soft parody. So if you think about something like Austin Powers, that's really obviously a comedy, and this is more like the kind of level of comedy that I think you could compare to something like Seth MacFarlane's The Orville, which is seen as a parody of Star Trek, but actually it's not that funny. Like it's just good. Sometimes it's just good Star Trek, and there's just a little hint of comedy in there that makes it not quite like Star Trek, but not like, you know, Family Guy kind of comedy. So I think it's a good comparison in the sense that it's not laugh out loud funny, but it clearly isn't as serious as an actual Bond novel. So yeah, I really enjoyed it, and it definitely plays with the conventions, and the main character is definitely he's pretending to be a spy basically, and it was a lot of fun. But it was a really unusual find. I couldn't believe when I found it. One, I couldn't believe I found a Robert Sheckley book I didn't have, but also I hadn't heard of that book, so that was really cool to see it. So there we go. Robert Sheckley, a man who I have been collecting all of my, not just all of my adult life, but a lot of my teenage years as well. He's one of the mainstays in my collection. There are basically 4 authors that I've been obsessed with collecting all of my life. And that's Robert Sheckley, Richard Matheson, Hal Nelson, and Richard Matheson, Robert Sheckley, Hal Nelson, and Ray Bradbury. Those are the 4 authors that I have just got anything I could. Anything, if I hadn't seen anything, I'd get it. And there are authors that I've discovered since then. So over the last sort of 6 or 7 years, I've been collecting as many Ursula K. Le Guin books as I could because I really like what she does. But I didn't, for some weird reason, I avoided her when I was a teenager and thought it was my sort of thing. But I absolutely love what she does. But yeah, Robert Sheckley is one of those big people in my collection, and I just never hear him talked about. So it's a strange thing. So I don't know, has anyone read anything by him? Do you find that it's just okay and you're not massively into it, but you get why someone might enjoy it? Or are you intrigued? Do you want to read Mind Swap? It's very funny. Do you want to read Dimension of Miracles, which is so obviously an influence on Douglas Adams? I don't know. Let me know below if you've heard of the man. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye.